Number operation, epic fury, the war they didn't want you Googling, cold open silence, then the sound of a gas pump clicking. Picture your guy right now, Tuesday morning. Normal dude. He rolls up to his local gas station in his F-150, same spot he's been going to for 15 years. He swipes his card, punches in his PIN, and nearly chokes on his Egg McMuffin. $6.89 per gallon. That ain't a typo, fam. That is not a glitch in the matrix. That is your Tuesday morning in America, March 2026. And this dude, he is times pissed. He wants answers. So he does what every red-blooded American does when something's got them shook. He whips out his phone and Googles it. But here's where it gets low-key terrifying. Because 3 weeks ago, the last week of February, there was something times blowing up on Google Trends. Something that had the whole internet absolutely bugging out. Something that journalists, podcasters, Reddit investigators, and your uncle who sends you long texts at 2 a.m. were all screaming about from the rooftops. The Epstein files. Y'all. The search interest for the Epstein client lists the most explosive, career-ending, institution-shaking document drop in the history of American politics was going times, absolutely vertical times in the last week of February 2026. We are talking about a cultural moment that made the 2016 election look like a school board meeting. Names, dates, transactions, the kind of receipts that don't just embarrass people. They times, N times people. And then February 28th hits, and the graph, it falls off a cliff, like somebody yanked the plug on the whole internet's memory. Search volume for the Epstein files drops 73% in 48 hours. Poof, gone. Buried under an avalanche of breaking news alerts that nobody saw coming. Now, you might be asking yourself, bro, what does Jeffrey Epstein have to do with my gas bill? Buckle up, homie. Because the answer to both of those questions, the dead search trends and the $6 gas, traces back to a single moment. A single decision made in the dead of night on February 28th, 2026. The night the United States of America and the State of Israel decided to change the entire world. And they called it Operation Epic Fury. That is not a Call of Duty map, no cap. That is the real declassified name for the most audacious joint military strike in 21st century history. On February 28th, 2026, U.S. and Israeli forces launched a coordinated multi-domain assault on the Islamic Republic of Iran, targeting over 15,000 locations across the country. 15,000 nuclear facilities, military command centers, air defense networks, Revolutionary Guard headquarters, missile launch sites, intelligence compounds, and one single solitary human being who the Pentagon decided needed to no longer be on this earth. The Ayatollah Khamenei assassination. Ali Hosseini Khamenei, supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran for over 30 years. The most powerful theocrat on the planet. The man who signed off on every proxy war, every nuclear centrifuge, every chant of death to America that ever echoed through a Tehran square. On February 28th, 2026, at approximately 2:17 a.m. local time, he was dead. And that right there, times that times, is why your gas costs $7. And times that times is why nobody is talking about the Epstein files anymore. Now, let's get into the sauce of this thing, because Operation Epic Fury did not just pop off overnight. This joint was times planned methodically by some seriously heavy hitters. Front and center Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Yeah, that Pete Hegseth, the one everybody said wasn't qualified, the one the Senate hearings turned into a three-ring circus. Turns out, while the talking heads were yakking about his resume on cable news, Ol Pete was quietly sitting in the Situation Room with Donald Trump and a very specific list of targets. 15,000 targets. Let that number marinate in your brain for a second. The entire US-led coalition in Iraq in 2003 struck maybe 800 targets in the first 48 hours. This operation in A times, single night times, hit 15,000 locations across Iran using B-2 stealth bombers, F-35S, Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from submarines in the Arabian Sea, and Israeli Air Force F-35 is screaming in from the north. This was not a strike, fam. This was in times erasure. On the Israeli side, the IDF had been preparing for this moment for years. Every exchange with Hamas, every drone that crossed the Lebanese border, every Iranian-backed rocket, it was all pointing toward this one night. Israel's Mossad had been tracking Khamenei's exact location for months through a combination of human intelligence assets embedded deep inside Iran and signals intelligence so precise it could tell you what the man had for breakfast on a Tuesday. The U.S. Navy had 3 carrier strike groups pre-positioned in the region, the Gerald R. Ford, the Dwight D. Eisenhower, and the Theodore Roosevelt. Together, that is over 200 aircraft plus submarine-launched cruise missiles. Combined with Israeli air power, the coalition had the kind of overwhelming force that basically turned Iranian radar into a participation trophy. But here is where it gets gnarly. No cap. Because Iran was not just sitting there within 6 hours of the Ayatollah Khamenei assassination. The Iranian military still in shock, still trying to figure out what in the world was even happening, started hitting back. And this was not your grandma's missile volley. Iran has spent the last decade building one of the most sophisticated ballistic missile arsenals on the planet, specifically because they knew times. They always knew that one day it was going to come to this. The first wave, over 400 ballistic missiles aimed at Israeli population centers. Tel Aviv, Haifa, Beersheba, Israel's Iron Dome, Arrow 3, and David Sling air defense systems were going absolutely ham, trying to knock down the incoming barrage. Most were intercepted, not all. The second wave, and this is where the entire Middle East started to realize this was not just a US-Israel versus Iran situation anymore. The second wave went times west, Gulf states under fire. That headline was burning on every news ticker by the morning of March 1st. Iran did not just retaliate against Israel. Iran turned to its neighbors, the ones who had been quietly letting American forces use their territory as staging grounds, and sent a message that was loud, clear, and delivered at hypersonic speeds. UAE took hits. Qatar, home to Al Udeid Air Base, the largest American military installation in the entire Middle East, took hits. U.S. bases at Al Dhafra, Al Udeid, and Camp Arifion in Kuwait all faced coordinated ballistic missile and drone strikes. Some were intercepted, some were not. American troops were in bunkers, fam. Let that sink all the way in. U.S. servicemen and women who woke up on February 28th thinking it was just another routine Thursday in the Gulf were sheltering from Iranian ballistic missile strikes by the following morning. This was not a proxy war anymore. This was direct. This was real. And this was only day 2. And then there was Hezbollah. Lebanon's Hezbollah, Iran's most battle-hardened proxy force, armed to the teeth, after years of Revolutionary Guard training and weapons transfers, launched what can only be described as a drone blizzard into northern Israel. Hundreds of drones, cheap, expendable, and completely overwhelming. The strategy is textbook asymmetric warfare. You do not need your drones to win. You need them to drain times the enemy's air defense missiles. At $100,000 a pop for interceptors versus $500 for a drone, Hezbollah was running an economic business model that would make a Harvard MBA break out in a cold sweat. Northern Israel looked like a war zone because it was won. Towns evacuated, fires burning in the hills, the kind of footage that goes viral before the smoke even clears. And the world was watching, transfixed, glued to their screens, which, as we are about to get into, was working out very conveniently for some very powerful people. But the big brain move from Iran, the cold-blooded, long game strategic play that nobody in the public discourse was fully ready for that move, did not involve a single missile. It involved 21 miles of water. By March 3rd, Iran had done something that no country had successfully pulled off in the modern era of global trade. They had blockaded the Strait of Hormuz. All right, stop everything. Because this right here, this is the part of the story that your local news station is glossing over between car dealership ads. This is the part that your financial advisor is losing sleep over at 3 a.m. This is the part that explains every single thing happening at every gas pump in America right now. The Strait of Hormuz blockade. 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, just 21 miles of ocean between Iran and Oman. A strip of water so strategically vital that military planners have had nightmares about it for 50 years. And right now, as of March 13th, 2026, Iran owns it. 20% of the world's entire oil supply flows through that strait every single day. 20% is roughly 21 million barrels of crude oil, Saudi oil, Kuwaiti oil, UAE oil, Iraqi oil, Qatari liquefied natural gas, all of it funneling through this one narrow choke point. And right now, every single drop of it is going nowhere.